Have you noticed something strange happening lately? Everywhere you look, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, people are suddenly talking about n8n. Build an AI agent with n8n, automate your entire business, replace this job with AI, build an AI employee. And looking at all of this, you could easily think n8n is another AI tool that appearing during the recent AI boom. But that's not actually what happened. n8n existed years before this AI agent hype started. And today, the company has reached a valuation of about $5.2 billion. So I became curious, how does a workflow automation tool that you can actually run on your own computer become a company worth billions of dollars? And more importantly, did AI create n8n success, or was n8n quietly building something for years and and happened to be in exactly the right place when AI arrived? That's what we are going to investigate today. Welcome to Tech Breakdowns, where we investigate the engineering, business, and reality behind successful software. And today we are investigate n8n. First, what exactly is n8n? At the simplest level, n8n is a workflow automation platform. Imagine you receive an email. You want information from that email to automatically go into spreadsheet. Then maybe send something to Slack, update your CRM, call an API, put some information into database, and now maybe even send that information to an AI model. Let the AI make decision and continue the workflow depending on that result. Normally, a developer could write code connecting all of these systems, but then you have to maintain that code, handle authentication, APIs, errors, servers, retries, and everything else that comes with a running software. n8n gives you a visual way of connecting these different pieces together. Each block on the screen is called a node. You connect those nodes, data moves between them, and together they create a workflow. That's the basic idea. But n8n didn't start because somebody suddenly thought AI agents are becoming popular. Let's build an automation company. The story goes much further back. The company was founded by Jan Oberhauser in 2019. And when I looked into why he originally created n8n, I found something interesting. The original problem was actually very simple. Jan explained that whenever he wanted to automate some small task, he would write a script. But writing the script wasn't the only work. He had to read documentation, write the code, put it in on GitHub, deploy it to a server, handle errors, configure SSI, and make sure the script restarted if something crashed. Think about that. You might spend more time maintaining the automation than the automation actually saves you. So he started building something for himself, a tool where this automation could be created visually using connected nodes. And on June 23rd, 2019, the n8n repository appeared on GitHub. What started as a personal project eventually became the company we are looking at today. And this is where the numbers become crazy. If you open the n8n GitHub repository today, you are looking at around 197,000 GitHub stars, around 59,000 forks, and hundreds of releases. The exact numbers will obviously keep changing, but the scale tells us something important. This is not some small project that suddenly became popular last month. There is a huge developer community around this software, and according to n8n's founder, as of May 2026, the platform had around 1.7 million monthly active builders and more than 1,400 enterprise customers. Then something even bigger happened. SAP invested in n8n, and that investment valued the company at approximately $5.2 billion. Now we need to be very careful here. That does not mean n8n makes $5.2 billion. That's not revenue. That's a valuation placed on the company in that investment. Those are completely different things. And this is exactly why we are investigating it. Because once a number like $5.2 billion appears on social media, the entire story behind that number disappears. And there is another detail that makes n8n interesting. You can actually self-host it. You can inspect its source code. You can run it on your own infrastructure. But technically, n8n today is not simply traditional open source software. It describes itself as fair code and source available. And that distinction becomes very important when we investigate the business. Because now we have a strange situation. A huge amount of the software is visible. People can self-host it. There is a massive developer community around it, and yet investors are valuing the company at billions of dollars. So, where exactly is the business? How did a personal automation project from 2019 turn into something used by more than million builders every month? And why did the n8n suddenly become almost impossible to avoid during the AI boom? To understand that, we need to go back to the early years of n8n, before everybody was talking about AI agents, because that's where the real story starts. So now we know where n8n started, but there is something important about this story. When Jan started building n8n in 2019, there was no ChatGPT, there was no explosion of AI agents, and people weren't uploading thousands of videos about automating entire business with AI. n8n was solving a much more ordinary problem, connecting software together, and actually, that market already had some very big competitors. Zapier had existed for years. Other automation platforms already allowed business to connect different applications. So Jane wasn't entering some completely empty market. He was entering an established one. And that raises an interesting question. Why would developers choose another automation tool when tools like Zapier already existed? One major difference was control. With n8n, developers could run the software themselves. They could host it on their own infrastructure. They could look at the source code. They could customize workflows. They could write code when the visual interface wasn't enough. And they weren't limited to only the simple automation that somebody else had designed for them. That made n8n interesting to a very different type of users, not just someone who wanted. When this happens, do that. When this happens, do that. But developers and technical teams who wanted much more control over what happened between those two steps. And that decision becomes extremely important later in the story. Now look at GitHub. Today we are seeing an enormous repository, thousands of issues, thousands of pull requests, a huge number of forks, hundreds of releases, and almost 200,000 stars. But obviously, it didn't start like this. The first public version appeared in 2019 when came another improvement, another integration, another bug fix, another release, another contributor, and slowly a community started forming around the project. This is something social media makes very difficult to see. When we discover a successful company today, we see today's version. We don't see version 0.1. We don't see the months where almost nobody knows the product exists. We don't see somebody fixing boring bugs on a Tuesday night. We just see $5.2 billion company. But between those 2 points, There are years of work. And investors started noticing what was happening in 2020. N8n announced a send investment of around $1.5 million. Then in 2021, the company around announced a $12 million Series A. And by 2023, N8n announced another $50 million Series B. Then the growth became much more dramatic. In March 2025, n8n announced a 60 million euro Series C at a valuation of roughly 560 million euros. Now watch what happens next. Only months later, in October 2025, n8n announced another funding round. This time $180 million at a valuation of around $2.5 billion. And then in May 2026, SAP invested in the company at approximately a $5.2 billion valuation. Just look at that progression from personal automation project to a company valued at hundreds of millions, then billions. And especially during 2025 and 2026, the valuation accelerated extremely quickly. So what changed? This is where AI enters the story. Remember, n8n was already built around workflows. A workflow basically says, take information from here, process it, make a decision, send it somewhere else, then continue. Now think about what an AI agent needs to do. Receive information, understand something, use tools, call APIs, access database, make decision, and then take another action suddenly. A workflow automation platform becomes an extremely natural place to build AI systems. n8n didn't have to invest the idea of connecting application after ChatGPT arrived. It had already spent years building that infrastructure. AI simply created an enormous new reason to use it. And you can see this directly in the product today. Open n8n and you will find integrations with AI models, AI agents nodes, vector bases, memory, tools, APIs, databases, hundreds of other services. You can create something where an email arrives, AI reads it, understand what the customers wants, checks information somewhere else, makes a decision, updates another systems, and sends a response. That's much more powerful than simply saying copy this email into spreadsheet. And suddenly people who had never cared about workflow automation started caring about workflow automation, because now everyone wanted to build AI agents. But here is the reality check. It would be very easy for us to say n8n became successful because of AI. I don't think that's the full story. AI clearly accelerated the company enormously. The recent funding, the attention, the number of builders, and the explosion of AI automation content all show how important this wave became. But n8n had already spent years building the foundation. The integration existed, the workflow engine existed, the community existed, the self-hosting model existed, the company existed. Then the market changed around them, and suddenly something they had been building for years became useful for much larger problem. That's a very different story from someone built an AI tool and became a billion overnight. And now we reach the part I find most interesting, because n8n gives away an enormous amount of capability. You can see the source, you can self-host it. There is free community edition. Developer contribute to the ecosystem. So if somebody can download n8n, run it themselves, and build powerful AI automations, why are company paying n8n? And how does a business built around software people can self-host become worth $5.2 billion? That's what we need to investigate next. So we have reached the question I think is the most interesting part of this entire story. If I can download n8n, self-host it, and build my own workflows, why would I ever pay n8n? And this is where the business model starts making sense, because n8n is not simply selling access to some secret piece of code. They're selling something much more valuable: convenience. Think about self-hosting for a moment. Yes, you can run n8n yourself, but then the server becomes your responsibility, update becomes your responsibility, big backups becomes your responsibility, security becomes your responsibility, scaling becomes your responsibility. And when something breaks at 2 in the morning, guess whose problem that becomes? Yours. For an individual developer, that might be completely fine. You might actually prefer it. But imagine you are running a company with hundreds of thousands of workflows. Those workflows might be connecting customers to data, internal systems, database, AI models, and the business critical processes. At that point, paying somebody else to handle part of the infrastructure can become a very reasonable business decision. And that's one side of n8n's model. If you look at their pricing, you will see hosted plans where n8n runs the infrastructure for you. You create the workflows and they handle the platform. Then, as customers become larger, the requirements become different. Companies may need things like more collaborations, administration, security controls, governance, support, and enterprise features. So the person experimenting with an AI workflow at home and a large company running critical automation are not really the same customer. And n8n can save both. That's important. There is another detail we should make clear. People often call n8n open source, but technically, that's not the complete story. n8n describes its model as fair code. Its source code is available, and you are allowed to self-host it under its license. But that doesn't mean anybody can simply take n8n, launch a compelling hosted n8n service, and sell the software however they want. There are licensing restrictions, and from a business perspective, that makes a lot of sense. The company gets many of the advantages of having the source available. Developers can inspect it, people can self host it, a community can form around it. The product can spread through technical teams, but the company still protects the commercial business it is building around the software. And I think this explains something much bigger about n8n. The free version is not necessarily the enemy of the paid product. It can actually become the entrance to the paid product. Imagine you are a developer inside a company. You discover n8n, you experiment with it, you build one workflow, then another, then your team starts using it, then another department wants it. Eventually the question changes. It's no longer can we run n8n. Of course you can. The question becomes, do we want to manage all of this ourselves? And for some companies the answer is going to be no. That's where commercial products become valuable. Now, after looking through this entire story, I think there are few lessons worth remembering. The first one is you don't always need a completely new idea. Workflow automation existed before n8n. Zapier existed before n8n. The integration platform existed before n8n. The opportunity wasn't necessarily inventing automation. It was approaching automation differently: more control, more flexibility, self-hosting, developer friendliness, and eventually deep AI capabilities. Sometimes the opportunity is not a completely new market. Sometimes it's a different way of serving an existing market. The second lesson is timing, but I don't mean thing as luck. n8n didn't wait until AI agents became popular and then start building workflow infrastructure. It had already been building for years. Then AI arrived, and suddenly the infrastructure became useful for something much bigger. You can't always predict when the market will change, but if you are consistently building something useful, sometimes the market eventually moves towards you. And the third lessons lesson might be the most important. Don't confuse the final result with the journey. Today we can look at n8n and say $5.2 billion valuation, millions of builders, enterprise customers, SA SAP investment, AI agents, huge GitHub community. But go back to 2019 and you are looking at one developer who was annoyed that automating simple tasks required too much work. That's where this started. Now, not this $5.2 billion with a problem. And before we finish, let's do what we are going to do with every company we investigate. Instead of copying n8n, what can its way of thinking inspires us to build? Here are 5 ideas. 1. An automation platform specifically for small local business. Instead of hundreds of complicated integrations, focus on WhatsApp, Google Sheets, payments, appointments, and customers follow-ups. 2. An automation tools specifically for lawyers. New case added, documents organized, hearing reminder created, client notified, and important information summarized automatically. 3. A workflow system for real estate business. New property inquiry comes in, match the requirement, notify the agent, follow up with the customer, and track whether the lead converted. 4. An AA document workflow, upload invoices, contracts, applications, or other documents, extract the important information, validate it, and automatically send it to the correct system. And 5. A very simple automation builder for people who aren't developers. Instead of showing hundreds of nodes, the user simply says, when this happens, I want this to happen, and the software creates the workflow underneath. None of these ideas automatically become a business. They still need customers, distribution, execution, and years of improvement. But that's exactly the lesson. When I started researching n8n, the $5.2 billion number looked like the story. After looking deeper, I don't think it is. The more interesting story is that someone had a frustrating technical problem in 2019, built a solution, kept improving it, build a community around it, found a business model that could coexist with self-hosting, and years later, AI dramatically expanded what that product could be used for. That's much harder to fit into 30 seconds reel. But that's the reality behind successful software. And that's exactly what we are going to keep investigating on Tech Breakdowns. Not just what a company is worth today, but what actually happened between the first line of code and the headline everybody sees. I will see you in the next breakdown.